The email arrived at 4:59 p.m. An automated notification from HR, sterile and impersonal. The subject line was a punch to the gut. Official notification of indefinite suspension. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This had to be a mistake, a system glitch. I was Liam, head of product development, co-founder of Innovatech Solutions. I didn't get suspended, I built this place. I clicked it open, my hand trembling slightly. The body of the email was brief, citing a gross misalignment with executive directives and a failure to adhere to the company's evolving cultural standards. It was signed electronically by the one person who couldn't possibly have approved this, Clara, my wife, the CEO. My office, with its panoramic view of the city we had conquered together, suddenly felt like a cage. The framed photo on my desk, us 10 years younger, beaming in the cluttered garage that was our first office, seemed to mock me. We had started with nothing but a brilliant idea and a shared dream. We ate ramen, slept on an air mattress, and poured every ounce of our being into Innovatech. I was the architect of our products. She was the visionary who sold them to the world. We were a perfect team, in business and in life. Or so I thought. I grabbed my phone to call her, but a second email popped up, this one directly from her personal account. The subject, tonight. The message was even shorter. Don't call. We'll discuss this at home. 8 p.m. sharp. Cold. Efficient. This wasn't my Clara. This was the CEO, the woman who had graced magazine covers, the titan of industry she had become. The warmth, the shared laughter, the late-night whispers about our future. It had all been slowly eroding, replaced by board meetings that ran late and business trips I wasn't invited on. I had chalked it up to stress, the pressure of running a billion-dollar company. I had been a fool. Walking out of the office was a blur of humiliation. The sympathetic, pitying glances from my team, the whispers that fell silent as I passed, it was excruciating. I felt like a stranger in my own kingdom. The drive home was a fog of confusion and rising anger. What executive directives had I misaligned with? I was the one who designed the directives. I arrived home at 7:30. The house was quiet, a minimalist mansion that always felt more like a corporate showcase than a home. Clara was already in the dining room, sitting at the head of our 16-foot-long marble table. She was dressed in a sharp, black pantsuit, a glass of red wine in her hand. She looked powerful, beautiful, and utterly unreachable. A man stood near the window, gazing out at the city lights. Julian, the new strategic consultant she had hired 6 months ago. A man with a smile too smooth and eyes that lingered on my wife a second too long. His presence in our home, at this moment, felt like a declaration of war. "Liam," Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Sit." I remained standing. "What the hell is this, Clara? Suspension? What is going on?" Julian turned from the window, a smug smirk playing on his lips. "He's a little emotional, darling. Maybe we should give him a moment." "He can handle it," Clara replied, her eyes locked on me. "Liam, your role at the company is contingent on your full cooperation. Lately, you've been resistant, obstinate." "Resistant?" I pushed back on your plan to outsource our entire R&D department, the very soul of our company? That's not being resistant, that's being sane. "That," she said, taking a slow sip of her wine, "is a matter of perspective. But this isn't about R&D. This is about us." She slid a folder across the polished table. It stopped inches from my hand. "This is about our future." My blood ran cold. I opened the folder. Inside was a legally drafted document, a post-nuptial agreement of sorts. I scanned the dense paragraphs, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes, until I landed on the core clauses. It outlined the terms of an open marriage. It detailed schedules, discretion clauses, and financial stipulations. And then the final, brutal paragraph. It named Julian Vance as a pre-approved long-term partner for Clara, granting him certain privileges, including cohabitation rights on designated weeks. My suspension, the document clarified, was a probationary measure. It would be lifted and my position restored upon my signing and notarizing this monstrosity. I looked up from the papers, my vision tunneling. The world had tilted on its axis. You're sleeping with him. It wasn't a question. My relationship with Julian is not up for debate, Clara said coolly. It's a reality. What is up for debate is your future and ours. I value you, Liam, as a partner, as the father of my future children. I don't want to lose you or what we built. This is a compromise. A modern solution. Julian stepped forward, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. Think of it as an evolution, Liam. Companies evolve, relationships evolve. You're a product guy. Think of this as marriage 2.0. I felt a surge of rage so pure, so white-hot, it almost blinded me. You are suspending me from my own company, the company I bled for, to blackmail me into accepting your affair? You're destroying our marriage, our life's work for him? I am preserving it, she snapped, her composure finally cracking. Don't you see? I can have what I need and you can keep your job, your status, our life. All you have to do is sign a piece of paper. Or you can have nothing. Your shares are vested, yes, but I hold the controlling stake. I can keep you suspended indefinitely. I can dissolve your department. I can erase you from the legacy of this company. Your choice. I was shattered. The woman I loved was talking about our marriage like a hostile takeover. For the next few weeks, I lived in a nightmare. I was locked out of my work accounts, barred from the building. I watched from the sidelines as Julian was promoted to Chief Innovation Officer, a title he clearly didn't deserve, parading his influence. I saw pictures of him and Clara at galas, his arm possessively around her waist. She was trying to break me, to starve me of my identity until I capitulated. But as the initial shock and heartbreak subsided, something else took root. Suspicion. This wasn't just an affair. Clara was ruthless, but she wasn't stupid. She loved Innovatech more than anything, maybe even more than me. Why would she risk it all for a man like Julian? A man whose resume seemed a little too perfect, whose charisma felt manufactured. He was a parasite, and I needed to find out what he was feeding on. My suspension gave me something I hadn't had in years: time. I started digging. Late nights were no longer spent coding, but sifting through public records, social media archives, anything I could find on Julian Vance. I used my severance pay to hire a discreet private investigator, an old-school guy named Marcus who specialized in corporate espionage. Marcus's first report was a bombshell. Julian had a history. 2 other tech startups he'd consulted for had suffered catastrophic data breaches and product leaks, both times right before a major launch. Both companies had folded shortly after. It was a pattern. He was a corporate saboteur. My heart pounded as the pieces clicked into place. My R&D department, the one Clara wanted to outsource on Julian's advice, was on the verge of a breakthrough. A new proprietary AI algorithm that would revolutionize the industry. It was our Project Daedalus, a secret so tightly kept that only a handful of us knew its full scope. Julian wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was positioning himself to steal our crown jewel. Clara's infatuation wasn't the motive, it was the method. He had seduced her, isolated her from me, the one person who would see through his charade, and was systematically dismantling my influence to get to the company's core secrets. The open marriage demand wasn't about sex, it was about getting me out of the way permanently. Armed with this knowledge, I orchestrated my counterattack. I couldn't go to Clara, she was too deep under his spell. I had to go to the board. I spent a week gathering irrefutable proof. Marcus tracked Julian's encrypted communications, uncovering messages between him and a shell corporation owned by our biggest competitor, Omnicorp. He had been feeding them our data for months. I compiled everything, the data logs, the financial trails, Julian's sordid professional history. It was a kill shot. I called for an emergency board meeting, exercising a clause in the company bylaws I had written myself years ago. Clara tried to block it, but I had the support of 2 other founding board members who were growing wary of Julian's unchecked influence. I walked into that boardroom a different man. The heartbroken husband was gone, replaced by a cold, focused strategist. Clara and Julian were at the head of the table, looking surprised and annoyed by my presence. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "The floor is mine," I said, my voice resonating with an authority she hadn't heard in years. I plugged my laptop into the projector. The first slide was a picture of our garage. "This is where we started," I said, my voice steady, "with a promise to innovate, to build something that mattered, a promise we have failed to keep." For the next hour, I laid it all bare. I presented the evidence of Julian's corporate espionage, piece by damning piece. I showed the encrypted emails, the offshore bank transfers from Omnicorp's shell company, the timeline of his sabotage that matched perfectly with his consulting history. The room was silent, the air thick with shock. Julian's face went from smug to ashen.